and welcome to Earth911's Sustainability in Your Ear, the podcast conversation with a changemaker working to accelerate the transition to a sustainable carbon-neutral society. I'm your host, Mitch Ratcliffe. Hey, we're back from our summer 2022 recording hiatus and getting ready for an incredible fall of interviews. We're going to be doing 2 and 3 a week, so stay tuned. Going to be an exciting year. We're joined today by Alex Garden, Chairman and CEO of Camarillo, California-based Zume, that's Z-U-M-E, which designs and builds the components to manufacture compostable molded fiber alternatives to takeout food and other packaging that can replace traditional plastic options, such as the expanded polystyrene meat trays that you see in the grocery store, the scoops included with baby formula, coffee cup lids, 6-pack holders, and plastic trays. The plastic versions of this packaging is a $390 billion a year industry that contributes to plastics 4.5% of total greenhouse gas emissions, 2.2 billion tons of CO2 equivalents annually, according to the December 2021 study published in Nature Sustainability. Zume's technology produces PFAS, that's forever chemicals, PFAS-free packaging, and the company uses rapid prototyping and 3D printing of molds so that it can design a unique solution to start manufacturing plastic packaging alternatives quickly. The challenge is growing production capacity, and Zume is making rapid progress after being founded in 2015. They provide partners a turnkey solution for making sustainable packaging rather than making the packaging themselves. Zume recently announced a partnership, for instance, with Transcend Packaging, a UK-based sustainable packaging maker that will expand its European presence with new production capacity coming online in 2023. It's already got manufacturing locations in the United States and India. There's a lot to talk about, so let's dive into how we can replace plastic packaging with sugarcane and other waste pulp alternatives that are currently discarded instead of put to good use. You can find out more about Zume at www.zume.com. That's ZUME.com. Welcome to the show, Alex. How are you doing today?
I'm great, Mitch. Thanks for having me.
Well, hey, thank you for taking the time to talk with our listeners. You've been with Zume since the beginning in 2015. Did you start out with a goal to replace the $390 billion a year plastic packaging industry? What was the evolution of the company, and how did you end up making molded fiber packaging?
Well, that's a great question. When I left my last industry job, I made the decision to devote the rest of my life and my career to service. I wanted to take all the things I learned about building big companies and to try to do something for profit, because that's how you get things to scale, for better or for worse, but something that was really going to make a dent. And my inspiration was my son. He was 5 then, he's 13 now. Him and his generation. And I wanted to look at the world not through the lens of my P&L, but through the lens of his generation. And I wanted to say, what are the major problems they're going to face? And is there something that I can do about that? And after doing a bunch of research, for me, it came down to 4 main categories of problems. And those are the categories of food security, water security, climate security, and then ultimately geopolitical security, which is the inevitable side effect of unevenly distributing wealth and surplus. And, 8 years ago, those were not very mainstream topics. And I'm sad to report, as you know well, that they are now all mainstream topics and getting worse at an accelerating rate. My surprise, as somebody who had spent my whole life focusing on technology, was that the highest point of leverage in all 4 of those areas was the global food supply chain. So Zume was founded initially on the thesis that we could invest in and advance the state-of-the-art of technologies in and around the global food supply chain. And now, having had some experience in the enterprise, I've learned that showing up with unproven technology is not the path to success. So we started our own reference customer, right? And it's hard to believe this, but in 2015, food delivery outside of the classics, pizza, Chinese food, wasn't actually very widespread, right? This was sort of pre-DoorDash. So we started a pizza company because at the time it was the most competitive segment that there was, really. And the thesis was, look, if we can operate a pizza company and identify and solve its problems, many of those solutions will eventually become great enterprise technology opportunities. So off we went. And that led us to a wide-ranging set of technologies, flexible robotics in kitchens, and advanced material handling solutions, and AI to balance supply and demand to reduce waste, and reverse logistics, and packaging. And the genesis for packaging was initially because we were serving a very high-quality, unstabilized Neapolitan pizza, and our observation was that it didn't survive the delivery process. And being scientists and dorks, we looked into the thermodynamics behind why that was happening and discovered that we could design a better pizza box. Now, it's a long journey, right, that had to do with state-of-the-art package manufacturing technologies and the economics of manufacturing and the global supply chain of manufacturing. But to make a long story short, that path of investigation led us to the business that we run today, where at a very high level and in the macro, we've created a platform that is now scaling globally. And that platform takes as its input globally available fibers, right? Agricultural waste, pulp and paper, which incidentally, the unmanaged disposal of agricultural waste is the largest source of black coal emissions in the world. So it takes those fibers and converts them in ways that we'll discuss into products which directly replace single-use plastics and EPS foam. So if we go back to the initial thesis, save the world with food, and if you had told me in the beginning we would do that by taking the byproduct of food production and converting it into not hydrocarbons, I would have said, "Wow, you're kidding." But this is the journey of discovery, and that's where we are today.
That's interesting. We've been writing about the pizza box and whether the pizza box is actually recyclable based on how greasy or cheesy it has become for a decade now. And so I understand the evolution of what you're talking about. But, you started with actual food and then gravitated to the packaging. Tell us about the materials you use, like bagasse, the byproduct of sugarcane production. How much of that kind of waste is out there? Is there more than enough out there to ensure that we have raw materials to replace the packaging that we currently use plastic to make?
Yeah, that's a great question. So let me address a couple of good points you raised there. So number one, we're trying to do something good, and so we really think about the totality of this process. Mm-hmm. And that means we think about the carbon footprint, the length of the supply chains, and the end of life. So you asked about input materials. So let's start there. So Zume is what we call fiber agnostic. And what that means is that depending on where we operate in the world, we use whatever's locally available. And let me compare that to a company that might have a dogma on a specific fiber, like bagasse, for example. If we were dogmatic about a particular fiber, that would mean that either A, we could only operate in certain parts of the world where that fiber was available, or B, we would have a long supply chain to import that fiber. And A, limits our scale and the impact we can have, and B, increases our carbon footprint. So instead, we're fiber agnostic. And that means that if we're operating in India, we might use locally available hardwood, softwood, and wheat straw. For example, that's an actual example. If we're operating in Brazil, we might use eucalyptus and bagasse. If we're operating in Canada, we might use FSC certified BCTMP, etc. Okay, and the reason for that is because in each part of the world there is some amount of biomass that is abundant, right? And that's in response to your second question. And there is also some biomass for which there is an established supply chain. And you hope to find that those Venn diagrams overlap. But what you're going to find is in certain parts of the world, you have a very mature supply chain and abundant sources of bagasse. In other parts of the world, that's wheat straw. In other parts, it's eucalyptus. In other parts, it's hardwood and softwood, etc. And you're also going to find that there's parts of the world where there's massively abundant biomass that unfortunately there is no mature supply chain for. So it's actually pretty complicated. And part of what we do for brands, which we can talk about, is we help them understand the supply chain that matches the needs of the product that you're making to the market to the locally available biomass that has the best possible impact on the environment.
This is really interesting because we've talked a lot on our show about creating local or regional supply chains around materials that are available. So let me ask just a couple of questions. Can you use post-consumer recycled fiber?
Yes.
Packaging?
Yeah, we can. There's this is a business which is like, if you ever wanted to find the bottom of the rabbit hole, you might want to start in the molded fiber industry, because boy, is there a lot of nuance. The answer is yes. There's two primary things that you want to keep in mind, and we could go way further than this, but there's two. Let's just stop at two.
Sure.
The first is that not all recycled paper, in fact, frankly, very little recycled. Well, let me widen it. Very little recycled fiber is processed in a way that makes it suitable for food contact.
Right.
So that doesn't mean that it can't be used, because, as you know, we make more than just food products, but it means that if you want to use it for food contact, it's a subset. And if you want to use it for non-food contact, you're probably fine. Okay, so that's the first thing to consider. The second thing to consider is that depending on where it sits in the recycling process, has it been recycled once or 10 times? The nature of the integrity of the fibers changes. And as the fibers age, as they're processed more and more, they become harder to work with.
Less coherent. Yeah.
Sure. Both are accurate summaries, although not scientifically correct. But the point is that they get harder and harder to use effectively, which doesn't mean that they can't be used. It just means they have to be blended with more, a higher concentration of more recent fibers. And so these are all things that we think through. But, in summary, we have examples of, recycled newsprint that are being made in Southeast Asia that have that are done to a very high standard, that are food contact certified. But we have examples of one of my personal favorites is a mechanically produced fiber from grass clippings in Germany. So it's really, really diverse.
That's fascinating. I'd love to get into that, but let's stay on the series of questions I was going to ask.
Sure.
So the other thing about making a regional production facility scalable is the ability to quickly retool in order to switch from one output to another. Is your system designed so that I could print, food takeout in the morning and the inserts for a phone package, that holds the phone in place in the afternoon?
Well, I mean, the short answer is yes, but given that you have an expert background in manufacturing, the long answer, which is no one would ever do that. Now,
today, though, are we thinking about one paradigm and need to move to another?
Well, I'm a big fan of challenging the paradigm, but only when there's a logical reason to do that. So I suppose in a perfect world, you would have no length to your supply chain. You'd have some magical replicator machine sitting on the counter, and it would make the thing you needed on demand, which would cut down on all sorts of steps in the supply chain. But as you know, we're not there today. So
we have a way to go before the Star Trek. You're right.
Yes, that would be great. So what does that mean? So we are Zume has invested a lot in, and we consider ourselves to be experts in very advanced tooling solutions. Tools that are made out of metal alloys, tools that are made out of advanced 3D printed additive solutions. And interesting mixed hybrids of the two, and that lets us do some really special things that are actually very agile. But that's not a very efficient way to approach production. So, taken in the abstract, the answer to your question is yes. But in practice, if you want to have a big impact, then you approach things slightly differently. So let me explain, so that it doesn't sound like an evasive answer. So let's think about the goal here at Zume. The goal is to save the world with food. That's our goal. We're trying to make the largest possible positive impact for the people that we care about in the world. Now, we talked earlier about how unmanaged disposal of ag waste is one of the largest sources, or the largest source, of black hole emissions in the world. That means that the more ag waste that we are able to consume, the bigger the impact we will have. So we could certainly focus on, using your example, we could certainly focus on high margin, low volume, jewel case like products. And for example, consumer electronics packaging, right? There's a great business to be run there, and we could make a great living doing that. But the changeovers are frequent, and the actual volume that you run is low. Okay, so therefore the impact would be low, even though the economic yield would be high. Now, another paradigm is this. So if we focus on very large categories, coffee lids, protein trays, widely used consumer electronics items like injection molded parts that are ubiquitous to every food service, powdered food service paradigm in the world, et cetera. These are things which represent collectively, tens of billions of units a year at least, and more. And when you set these things up and run them, you end up consuming huge volumes of input materials, and thus sequestering the maximum amount of what would otherwise be carbon emissions, and you replace the largest number of hydrocarbon-based alternatives. And so there's nothing wrong with what you suggested. And yes, we could do it, but it's contra purpose to our overall mission. We're trying to make the biggest impact we possibly can. And as a result, we tend to favor large, long runs, which end up making a big dent.
Perfectly understandable. I mean, the sort of the end goal would be that replicator scenario where, well, you need this package, let's make it. But the practical reality is we've got a long way to go to get there. Let me ask this.
Yeah. Do you mind? Sorry, Mitch. Pardon me for interrupting. Do you mind if I introduce a word that is different than practical?
Mm-hmm.
I like the word pragmatic. All right, because as a human, a constituent of Earth, I've listened to an awful lot of hyperbole from people who will tell you, like, the answer is this, the answer is that, and they have these really extreme views that, while they are academically correct, are so ivory tower and so far away from a pragmatic reality that what ends up happening is we short circuit and we do nothing. Right. And
a totally fair point.
Right. And so what we've tried to do, and you're going to hear me use this concept a lot, we've tried to focus on pragmatic solutions, right? Things that are good for the environment at scale that we can do today so we can make a difference.
So would you describe Zume as a recycling company? One of the most interesting observations I've heard recently was from Trex, the maker of the hybrid plastic and wood fiber decking. They started off, I was surprised, as a recycling company. They looked at plastic film and said, there's a source of material we can turn into something of value. Is that part of what informs how you think about Zume's business?
I don't think about it that way. I think about us as a sustainability solutions company, and those solutions involve economic solutions. They involve business model solutions. They involve brand solutions, industrial solutions, financing solutions, and then obviously technology solutions. But it's the intersection, how all of those things come together to create an excuse or a justification, maybe that's a better word, to quickly pursue a material and meaningful scale, right? And so to me, I think about it more as a sustainability solutions company.
This is a great place to take a quick break. We need to pay for the show. We'll be right back. We're back to continue our conversation with Alex Garden, Chairman and CEO of Camarillo-based California Zume, which makes compostable molded fiber alternatives to plastic packaging. So, Alex, let's talk a little about how these materials perform once you've purchased and used them. Is a Zume package industrially or home compostable? Or are you thinking about both?
Yeah. So, Mitch, as you know, in the U.S., it's a bit tricky because there isn't officially a standard for home compostable. It's not a measured standard,
And
but
very little commercial composting either.
Yeah, this is an additional problem. You're quite right. But for the dorks amongst us, the U.S. standard that is most applicable is called the ASTM D6868 standard. And the way that's measured, it's actually kind of a funny test. The way it's measured is they take your product. This is independent lab testing. And they literally bury it in the ground, and they wait 90 days, and they dig up the plot of earth it was buried in. And they put it through this scientific sifter. And if anything fails to fall through the sifter, you fail. That's the standard. So everything that we sell today is measured to the ASTM D6868 compostability standard, which effectively means if you bury it in your backyard, it's gone in 90 days. So that is not home compostable because that's not an official legal standard in America, but that's how it's tested. So draw your own conclusions. Okay. Now. And of course, depending on what markets we operate in globally, we adhere to the highest standards we can find in those markets. Now, you made a point about industrial composting. If you're in Europe, that's more common. If you're in the US, it's much less common, and it's even more complicated than that because, unfortunately, many things which technically might be industrially compostable are rejected from the waste stream because they are indistinguishable from their non-compostable brethren. And Correct. So sadly, the extreme overwhelming vast majority of all waste ends up either managed in landfills or unmanaged in various parts of the environment, including the waterways. And that's just really very incredibly tragic for all of us, but that is what happens. So there's an open point that perhaps we can come back to at some point about like what is the future of composting and how can we all do something about that. But that's a whole different topic. And if you don't mind, I'll add one more thing. Because we're dealing with fiber products, they are, and we don't use any. We use zero polymer-based coatings. We are in most cases eligible for both the recycling and the composting waste stream.
That's great to hear. And folks listening on the show right now, really the only state in which you can reliably assume that there is commercial composting available is California. Yeah.
In some cities.
Well, at this point, though, there's at least a state law in place that is driving the increased use of that. So it's good to see that happening. And I think we're probably 5 years away from some sort of ubiquity in terms of thinking about composting. Now, you just mentioned coatings. How does Zume prevent liquid and grease from soaking through a food package without using PFAS, the forever chemicals, which are showing up literally everywhere these days?
Yeah. Okay. Well, so listen, I mean, the answer to your question really depends on what we're trying to prevent passing through the package. Mm-hmm. And I will specifically address your point on PFAS. So, there's solutions we offer for water resistance. There's solutions for oil and grease resistance, moisture vapor transmission. So moisture vapor resistance, oxygen resistance, and more. And we have a pretty comprehensive set of future solutions on the drawing board. And I'll take this point in the conversation as an opportunity to highlight one of two very, very important partnerships we have in this company. And the first of the two is with a company called Solenis. So they have been phenomenal collaborators and partners with Zume for years now. And one of the many things we've done with Solenis that I'm proud of is around PFAS. So as you pointed out, rightly, there's a growing body of evidence that talks about not only the length of time that PFAS last in the environment, but also the impact they have on human and other health. Mm-hmm. And so Solenis has a chemistry family that is a safe alternative to PFAS. And we worked with them to find a commercially viable application for that chemistry. Like what's the process? How do you use it? What fibers does it work with? There's a lot of sophistication involved. And about a year and a half ago, I spoke with their CEO, Mr. Panicella, and I said, listen, John, this science is pretty clear, and you guys have really done the work, and we've done the work with you to engineer a commercially viable alternative to PFAS. Do you agree? And he said, I agree. I said, look, I think we ought to just open source it. Let's just share it with the world. Let's tell everyone how to do it. Because, in particular, if you look at the overseas manufacturing framework, there's less of an incentive for them to change because the regulatory pressure on PFAS is lower. And the nature of the way that their manufacturing lines work, they have less of an incentive to invest in the R&D around this. So why don't we just make it available? I mean, there's strategic reasons for us to do it, but it's also just the right thing to do. And he is a really amazing guy, and he agreed. So we did it. We open sourced it. And I'm really proud to say that it had the impact we had hoped. And now, in fact, globally, all of the major manufacturers in the world are reaching the end of their runs that include PFAS. It's pretty great.
Congratulations on doing that first, because I think open sourcing a lot of this research would help. Here in the rich world, we enjoy a lot of advances that are simply not available to everybody else, and
that's correct.
That's very admirable. Thank you.
Hey, we joke about this internally all the time, but saving the world is a team sport. And
yes, it is.
And you're quite right. I think it's trite, but this notion that if you are a privileged person, you have an increased responsibility to help. I mean, that we can't forget that, right? And so sitting here as the beneficiary of advanced research and development and flexible financing models, we have a higher propensity for these breakthrough discoveries, and hoarding those is the wrong thing to do, right? Obviously, we have to run businesses responsibly, and we have to have good, solid strategic rationales backing the decisions we make. But we should be looking for every possible way we can to make life easier for people who are less fortunate than us. Because ultimately, even if you want to take the altruism out of it, that increases geopolitical security and makes all the people that we care about safer.
And makes it easier to run a business. I think that's one of the underlying things that a lot of people simply ignore, is that doing all the good things ends up making a stable world in which it is possible to grow something economically.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to over glorify what we do, right? I mean, I like to try and remain grounded and not to overemphasize the impact that we're making here. But what I will tell you is we're trying as hard as we can every day to do the best we can operating in the platform that we do.
Well, let me ask a different question from a different vector, and that relates to your six-pack can holders, which you're making. They're fiber-based alternatives to the plastic six-pack ring. How does that fiber alternative reduce carbon footprint and environmental impacts in comparison to six-pack holders? Do you have a basic summary of the benefits?
Yeah, I mean, we have LCAs that we do for our primary categories, and we try to update them once a year, so we can not just measure our performance versus the category, but measure our performance against ourselves. Like, are we getting better every year? Which we are, hard to say. Since you're obviously a sophisticated consumer of this sort of information, you know that you can't. It's not precise to say that one thing is better than another, because there's a lot of nuance there. What you have to do is you have to look at it effectively categorically, and you have to look at it in a very specific manufacturing context. And another way of saying that is, you might find you're better in 3 out of 5 categories when you're manufacturing in one part of the world, and only better in 2 out of 5 when you're manufacturing in another one. So I want to establish that for anybody here who's a fan of reading life cycle analyses. I want to establish some credibility by first acknowledging that there's a lot of nuance. And now I'll answer your question. We have overall a lower environmental impact than the hydrocarbon-based alternative for virtually everything we make. In some cases, it's a lower carbon footprint. In other cases, it might be, the same carbon footprint, but we're significantly better on, ocean acidification or, impact on landfills and waterways, right? So
post-use benefit compared to
yeah,
manufacturing benefit.
Yeah. Well, yes, that's true, but also, you have to think about your cost of inputs as well. Okay. So if you're using plastic-based pellets for your input, you have to accept the hydrocarbon overhead, the hydrocarbon exploration overhead, and the length of the supply chain. So it's super complicated. I think that the relevant question that people should be asking is, hey, is this better for the environment?
Right.
Because and the answer is yes, it is. And I'm proud to say we get better every year. So I know that's like a super high level hand wavy answer, but in a conversation like this, that's about as true of an answer as you can provide. We're better. The answer is nuanced, and it depends on a lot of factors. And I will say one last thing, that those life cycle analyses, we have those performed by an arm's length firm. So that's not just our opinion on it. We get ourselves measured each year.
Now, this raises a different question, but I think one you've already begun to address, and that is, does Zume have its own sustainability goals? You talked about different inputs and different pragmatic issues that you have to deal with in various markets, but are you setting an emissions goal, a waste goal, and otherwise that you've published?
No, not yet. What we are doing is we understand what the key sensitivities in our manufacturing model are. So let me give you an example. So we in any kind of thermoforming process, you consume a lot of heat.
Right.
And historically, we generated that heat using electricity. And of course, we look for clean sources of electricity. But because we operate around the world, we obviously don't control energy policy, and I can't guarantee those clean sources of electricity exist. And so, among many other things, one of the key areas of investment for us is ways to dramatically reduce the power consumption of the process. And I'm proud to say that we've already made big strides there. And in the next fiscal year, we have another major step that we'll be introducing into our production process that is a step function improvement in overall power consumption. So we don't have published corporate sustainability goals, ironically, but what we are doing is prosecuting aggressively every major sensitivity that represents waste or unnecessary consumption out of our business. And if that seems strange, it doesn't really to me, because our whole business purpose is sustainability. And as we're pushing on and trying to improve the areas where we judge ourselves as being less than perfect, we're getting further down the sustainability pathway. And we're inventing a lot of new things. And so it's sometimes hard to measure your progress when you're the first people in the world to do something.
But again, that's a pragmatic approach. And we can
for now. Yeah. And in the future, Mitch, the answer that I'll give you is 100% yes, once we've established the business better.
So we've taken a lot of your time, and I appreciate it. Let me ask this sort of catch-all question. Your products are already price competitive with plastics. In the case of food packaging,
in most cases, yeah. In some cases, we're at parity. In some cases, we're actually lower, and in some cases, we're higher. It depends on the category.
When you net out the benefits, though, there are price competitive, and
that's correct. Yeah.
Secondarily, you're FDA approved as food safe for your food packaging. Your products are recyclable. They use waste fiber.
And compostable. Yeah.
And what's blocking the wholesale displacement of plastic packaging? What are the steps that you need to take, or that the industry needs to take, in order to make this switch?
Yeah, look, that's such a great question, and I suspect you already know the answer, but I really like the question. So there are four legs to the stool, if you will, that need to be satisfied in order for ubiquitous adoption to happen. I'll take for granted in this that the judge in this example has already accepted that this change has to happen, because you may be shocked to learn that not everybody agrees that it has to happen. But
really perish the thought.
But assuming that one does agree, there's 4 legs, and here's what they are. Number 1 is the form, the physical shape. And it requires, plastic is a very advanced material. So we're talking about sub-millimeter precision, negative draft angles, undercuts, snap fits, leak proof, like very, very difficult shapes to make. So form. Also accept that the largest brands in the world have unbelievably expensive, fully capitalized, high-speed back-end fill lines, and expecting one of them to change those lines to satisfy your sustainability goals is ridiculous. So form is essential, all right? Number 2 is performance, right? The barrier properties of the product. It has to perform as well as plastic. We talked about things like water resistance, oil resistance, moisture vapor transmission rates, oxygen barriers, aseptic barriers, resistance to protein, resistance to fats, oven safe, freezer safe, fridge safe, counter safe, microwave safe. There's a lot of aspects that people take for granted that are essential. Encapsulation of loose fibers, the ability to wash something off if it's dropped on the ground, et cetera. There's just a lot of things that are endemic to plastic that are not to fiber that you have to think about. So the second leg of the stool is performance. The third one is price. As much as, I'll tell you what, I haven't come across a single individual in a company who doesn't have a father or a mother or brother or sister or a child or a niece or nephew that they love and care for. Not one, anywhere in the world. And these people want to do the right thing, right? By and large, no matter what you think about their companies. Yeah. The thing is that even though there's this general agreement that we have to save the world, you'll notice that these companies aren't being given relief in the market. So said a different way, sure, we have to save the world, but you better not miss earnings. Mm-hmm. And so that means that unless we can offer them solutions, true solutions, at prices they can afford, they don't have permission to adopt them. So price is essential. And then the last is end of life, which is that, like at the end of the day, this isn't greenwashing. We have to be building something which is effectively better. And we talked a lot about that. So that has to exist as well. And I this is not always the case, but I'll add this as a fifth. When we're dealing with these large category creators, these huge, large volume things, we're talking about manufacturing at least hundreds of millions a year, more often billions and billions a year. And when you're a brand that can't sell a product unless they have the package or the otherwise plastic item in question, if you don't have that package, you don't sell your product. That means that's a zero revenue event for you, right? So we're talking about mission critical manufacturing. So even if you had the 4 legs of the stool, if a brand doesn't have confidence that you can deliver on time in full with an acceptable level of risk, they can't give you the business, even if they want to. So that's the challenge in front of ubiquitous adoption. We have 70 years of really advanced manufacturing apparatus to produce the plastic products that we take for granted. And replacing those is a high bar. You have to hit the form, the performance, the price, the end of life, and the supply chain security. And when all of those things come together, you've created permission for brands to adopt these better solutions at scale. And that's what we've been working on at Zume. The last 8 years have involved creating the technology, the business model, the financing model, the global footprint, and frankly, the bridge, if you will, between the largest brands in the world and the largest industrial companies in the world, and creating permission for the two of them to meet together in a new way around a new substrate with a compelling roadmap of future improvements that makes this a good bet for them.
A lot of the folks who are listening to the show also are interested in encouraging the quick service restaurants that they frequent, grocers and so forth, or buying this kind of material directly. Are there ways for them to help encourage those entities to make this change or to buy directly from you?
Yes. I'm actually surprised, this is the funny thing, it's a small thing, but I'll just give you a personal consumer example. I love coffee. I think it's the only reason I'm vertical half the time. And, so I rarely pass up an opportunity to go get a coffee. But obviously, working in the packaging industry, I'm hypersensitive to the waste every time I get a cup of coffee. So, I go into a store and they make my coffee, and I'll say, "Hey, can I just get the cup? Like, I don't want a sleeve, I don't want a lid." And they always ask, they're like, "Why?" And I'm like, "Well, I work in the packaging business, and I just think a lot about the overall consequence of all these various accoutrements that we stack onto the coffee here. I mean, I'd rather just get it in a ceramic cup if I can." But then they'll always say, "Hey, that sounds great. Can we buy it from you?" Right. So
Sure.
as a consumer, I mention it because you might be surprised how I'll use this word loosely, how easy it is to get that conversation started in a restaurant. Now, if you're dealing with the owner or a single unit restaurant, it's the easiest. If you're dealing with a chain, it's always harder because you have to go up to the people who make the purchasing decisions. But don't be fooled and think that the pressure that you put on retailers is not effective. It's very effective. So do it. Ask the questions. Do it nicely, but do it. Now, to answer your second question, can they buy from us? Yes. We distribute our products in 26 countries today. And in some of those countries, we sell direct. And other countries, we work with some of the best brokers and distributors in the world. And we would be thrilled to have the business, like really thrilled. I mean, it's a privilege to serve people and to do it safely. And we could always use more business.
Well, Alex, it's been a pleasure to talk with you, and I look forward to our next conversation. Thank you very much.
It's been a pleasure to be here, Mitch. Thank you very much for having me.
We've been talking with Alex Garden. He's the chairman and CEO of Zume. It's a Camarillo-based California compostable molded fiber manufacturing and design company. And folks, once again, we've heard that rethinking packaging is one of the most essential layers of reinventing our economy for sustainability that we can address. There are a lot of steps, though. We heard about the fact that it includes choosing materials, the economics of distribution, the economics of manufacturing, and of getting this material into an end-of-life solution like composting or recycling that will make a difference so that we don't leave a lot of crap for future generations. We also heard that consumers have the greatest leverage. So, the next time you're in a quick service restaurant, ask for a cup that is better for the environment. Ask for a lid that isn't made of plastic. Ask them not to put a cuff on it or a sleeve on it so that you reduce your impact. Your actions translate into signals that are sent back up into the supply chain and tell them to start to rethink what they make and use. I hope you'll take a few minutes to share this podcast, which was a fantastic interview, by the way, with your friends, family, coworkers. Let's get everybody thinking about better ideas so that we have less waste. There are more than 230 of these podcasts out there. I hope you'll go to Apple or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts, download and share a link with somebody today. Take care of yourself, take care of one another, and let's all take care of this beautiful planet of ours. We'll be back with another innovator interview soon. In the meantime, I'm Mitch Ratcliffe. You all have a green day.